And welcome to the Modern Meltdown's 5-minute movie reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing a film called Spectre. And it raises probably more questions than it answers. And speaking of questions, who's this guy and what's he doing here?
It's me, Roy, from the podcast.
Which podcast?
It's the Modern Meltdown.
I don't listen to the Modern Meltdown podcast. Yeah.
It's at www.themodernmeltdown.com. Check it out.
So shameless. Now, if you've never seen one of our 5-minute movie reviews, what we do is we have exactly 5 minutes to bring you a comprehensive film review. Otherwise, Roy here is going to be dropped into a tank full of sharks with laser beams on their head.
Sweet release.
It was a very terrible film.
It was not a great film.
So, without any more hesitation, let's jump straight into it. So, put the clock up. Okay, Spectre was meant to be the James Bond Daniel Craig film that timed all the other films in the franchise together. It was meant to bring them as one cohesive story. But what we get, basically, is the heads of the villains slapped up on a wall. And it's terrible. It's just terrible. So, the movie had everything that it needed to work, but it just doesn't work. Mendes had just directed Skyfall, which was fantastic. Christoph Waltz as a villain. I mean, come on, man. The guy is great, and he was leading Spectre in the film. Daniel Craig, so far, has been a pretty serviceable James Bond, and it had a fantastic supporting cast.
But the first problem of the film is that the previous films weren't written to be part of a larger interconnected story, except Quantum of Solace and Casino Royale, which were part of their own two-parter. So with nothing to link all the previous villains to this film, they had to make up something, and that's exactly what it felt like. They just said that the previous villains were all working for this film's Spectre. And there was also a brief cameo by Judi Dench. So if I was James Bond in this scenario, I would have felt very bemused when the ultimate villain comes along and tells me that everything that had happened was all part of his ultimate plan, when there was really no evidence to support that.
But let's be fair, Roy. We don't watch James Bond films for their plot. We watch them for the action. But the problem is that the action sequences need a really good gelling scenes to bring it all together, and there's nothing like that in this film. You've also got this clash between the classic way of James Bond and the new way of James Bond, and because they're trying to force them together, ultimately the film feels half-hearted and really disjointed.
That's right. The film can't decide what it wants to be. It tries to cling too hard on the old Bond way of doing things. Those times are over. We've spent the last few films, getting rid of these silly gadgets and over-the-top villains. But these old tropes, I feel like they just won't resonate with the newer audience who are familiar with Craig's James Bond. And the people who are fans of the old films, they're probably not going to appreciate this half-assed attempt at classic Bond. And so in one swoop, you've alienated everyone who's going to go see the film.
And when they tried to bring the classic elements into the action sequences, which the classic scenes used to be very over-the-top and kind of silly, and when they try and do that with a group of characters who seem more disinterested in the film than the audience, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
It's never going to work.
Yeah, the next thing that's wrong is, unfortunately, it's the villain. Like, Christoph Waltz, he's a fantastic actor, right? But in this film, he just fell flat. Some directors like Tarantino, they know how to get the best out of this guy. They get great performances out of him, but why can't Mendes? And it's simply because he's got nothing to work with, right? His dialogue is terrible.
Yes.
He does his best to deliver the lines, but when you've got a scene like, it's with lines like, it's my meteor, would you like to touch it? You can't say that and sound menacing.
It's shocking, even for old Bond.
Yep.
Now, the other problem with the film, of course, is the very finite and superficial links between all the characters, as well as the fact that they constantly reference the other films in the franchise, which you may or may not have seen, in veiled whispers. And at that point, you've got to wonder, do I really care anymore? Do I care about what they're talking about? Do I care what's going on? No one else does.
There was none of those gelling scenes.
Any redeeming features for you?
Well, there was one redeeming feature, which I felt was Lea Seydoux' character, Madeline Swan. She was the most interesting character, the only one who seemed at all care about what was going on around her. And initially it seemed like her arc would be an intriguing deviation from the typical formula, but pushing Bond away, and you're not going to fall for him. But towards the end, where the movie came to its "will Bond die" moment, and she professed her undying love for Bond,
Came out of nowhere.
You're left wondering, well, when did they fall in love?
Well, after the sex. After the very forced, weird sex.
Yeah.
So, in summation, Daniel Craig's Bond was terrible in this film, and I'm not going to bother talking about him. If you want to visit films that have the same themes, then I would highly recommend checking out Mission Impossible 5 or Captain America 2, The Winter Soldier.
That's a good one.
Because, let's face it, at least those crews gave a shit about their movie.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.